Thank you so much for coming to CIPA's Belonging with Intention, Creating and Presenting Amidst Adversity. We hope to have a really dynamic talk today that will include the audience. But before we kick everything off, I'd like to invite our panel of esteemed arts administrators and artists to introduce themselves. So Josh Benson, grab the mic and please tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Josh Benson. I am the Executive Director of the Marion Cultural and Civic Center. It is an 1,100-seat presenting venue varying from high-level commercial concerts to niche immersive theater. And I'm also a founding co-host and producer of the There's No Business Like podcast, as well as an active mural artist.
All right, Josh, come on. Good morning, my name is Nicole Brewer. Some of the ways that I show up in the industry, I'm faculty at the David Geffen School of Drama at Yale in the acting department. I'm the author of The Anti-Racist Theater, Crafting Theatrical Space, which will be out later in the year. And how else do I show up? I mean, besides being like a writer and a facilitator of anti-racist work, and so my particular approach is more about how do we connect our collaboration rather than looking at the history of racism in the country.
Good morning. I'm Fernando, CEO of Thalian Hall Center for the Performing Arts in Wilmington, North Carolina. It's actually one of the oldest continually operating venues in the United States, opening in 1858. And I'm on the board of APAP and also a beekeeper. So,
We've got our own. Good morning, everybody. My name is Sibilsky. I'm a producer and cultural journalist focused on meaningful global exchange. I'm also CIPA's, which is Creative and Independent Producers Alliance, who represents our panel today, community and conferences leader. So we facilitate events like this at conferences, also subsidies and support for creative independent producers. Some of the projects I'm working on that I think have relevance to our conversation today are New York Arab Festival, Rowdies in Love, which is a Bharatanatyam queering contemporary piece, and also Indonesian dance company Prehistoric Body Theater.
Hello, gorgeouses. Hi. I know, it's 9 a.m., y'all. It's 9 a.m., okay? But we are here, okay? We are here and we are together. I am Beatrice Thomas, AKA Black Benatar. I am a storyteller, a world builder, which means I'm here to bring people together and to build the world anew. I'm also a printmaker, so I'm loving this interdisciplinary panel here. I am one of the founders of the National Drag Story Hour Network, and I am a performance artist who just recently did a puppet piece called Black Benatar versus the System, a hysterecta mystery. And it is a Law and Order style dramedy as told from my organs, an indictment of the healthcare system. So it is funny, I promise. Okay.
How do I follow up on that, Beatrice? Just be. Good morning. I agree. Thank you for being with us and being awake and joining our community at 9 a.m. on a Saturday. My name is Lesley Williamson. I am based in Ithaca, New York. Ithaca is gorgeous. For the last 14 years, I've served as the executive director of the Saltonstall Foundation for the Arts. We were founded in 1995 by an out gay woman of some means who died very young. She was a photographer and an artist. After she died, she donated her house, about 200 acres of her property and a portion of her inheritance to establish a foundation to support artists and writers in New York State. So we are essentially a residency program and a retreat space for visual artists and literary artists in New York State. And it's a pleasure to be with you this morning, and I'm already loving this panel.
And I'm Justine Bayod Espoz. I am the executive director of Torito Arts, a nonprofit arts production organization based in Chicago and working with international artists, bringing international artists that work with their roots cultures and bring them into a contemporary mind frame and bringing that to the US. I am also the executive director of the Creative and Independent Producer Alliance, CIPA. As Cindy mentioned, we have brought this type of conversation. We started out at WA, and we wanted this conversation to continue at APAP because it was such an important conversation to have. There was a lot of resonance with the people who attended at WA, so we're hoping to find the same reaction and the same response here. In order to do that, I would like to start with a provocation. Of course, this is a provocation to think. And a provocation to share your experiences. So here we go. As a country, as an industry, as a planet, we, the collective we, are living a moment of great uncertainty. We worry about the environment, politics, the economy, our safety, our health, our jobs, our autonomy and freedom, regardless of political leanings, race, gender, or sexual orientation. Some feel the pressures of this uncertainty more acutely than others because of their place in our society's pecking order. But I dare say none of us can escape the anxiety felt as we wait for the next life-changing shoe to drop. I've noticed that more and more often I find myself in a cycle of fight or flight, anger or dismissive exhaustion, and I know it's because of the high-powered computers that seem inextricably linked to our hands. These cameras that turn everyone into a journalist or a content creator, and the resulting barrage of output, the never-ending streams of image and sound that have the power to show us beautiful and moving works of art, or horrific video of people's basic human rights being violently violated. As we doom scroll clips of such disparate audiovisual information, we lose any notion of what is real, what is AI, what is propaganda, and more importantly, how to feel about it. Lines blur between fact and fiction and between what is acceptable and what is not. And we find that our uncertainty grows and challenges our ability to take action when necessary. Yes, we are living a moment of great political, financial, ethical, and moral adversity. But these types of moments have dictated the course of human history. Our present situation may involve different faces and factions, but the challenges people and communities face manifest similarly, regardless of time or place. It's hard not to focus on the present because so much is in dire need of fixing, but for just a little while, I want to take us back to another time and place. One you discovered most likely in grade school when you first learned about Christopher Columbus. Most of us were taught about Fernando and Isabella, the Catholic kings, who in 1492 had just completed the reconquest of Spain with the toppling of the Moorish kingdom of Granada. As an aside, we also learned that the said Moorish kingdom, Al-Andalus, was a society of tolerance in which believers of the three monotheist religions, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, lived peacefully. It was also a society that valued enlightenment and showed enormous progress in mathematics, medicine, engineering, architecture, the arts, and more. The dominant culture in Al-Andalus was without question the Muslim culture. The kings of the caliphates would always be Muslim. But Jews and Christians could still access positions of power, economic prosperity, and even political influence. The cultural practice and artistic traditions that developed during this nearly 800 years of coexistence represented all of Al-Andalus, with only slight variations in practice from one religion to the next. But in 1492, the growing unity and backing of Christian kingdoms in Europe and continued squabbles amongst Muslim leadership ultimately led to the success of the inappropriately named Reconquest, as the Iberian Peninsula had yet to exist as a Christian-dominated region. We also learned in school that Christian dominance came with the forced conversion and expulsion of Iberia's Muslims and Jews, although our grade school teachers most likely spared us the horrors of the Inquisition, leaving Monty Python to fill those gaps. Beyond the conversions and expulsions, what most of us don't know is that true Christian uniformity was obtained through the eradication of heretical practices. In other words, any cultural practice that was considered linked to Judaism or Islam. If people wanted to sing their songs, dance their dances, tell their stories, they had to do so in secret, and always with the heavy weight of harsh consequences that discovery could bring. Although few royal edicts directly prohibited cultural practice aside from worship, it was understood that the use of traditionally Moorish instruments, the performance of any traditional Moorish dance or musics, would be seen as indicators of false conversion. Neighbors and friends were now spies and informants, and any whiff of cultural impropriety could lead to the Inquisition's tribunal. The banning of traditional and ethnic, cultural, and artistic practice is one of the most insidious tools in an authoritarian regime's arsenal, because it attacks both the sense of self and the sense of community. Our community and culture define our values and identity from the moment we are born. So the erasure of cultural practice from the society that we live in, sends the powerful message that we will not be visible, we will not be welcome, we will not be safe, unless we deny who and what we are and conform to the ideals and culture forced upon us by those who hold power. But if any beauty can be found in these moments of desperation and darkness, it's the fact that culture is near impossible to eradicate. Those Iberian Muslims and Jews who chose to leave all of their wealth and belongings behind and to continue practicing their faith took Al-Andalus's culture with them and spread it wide across the Mediterranean, North Africa, and the Middle East. The instruments of Al-Andalus still exist and are used to this day within the broader canon of Muslim music. The poetry, songs, and dances of Sephardic Jews and Spain's Moors have been saved, treasured, and can still be heard today. And in Spain, particularly in Andalusia to the south, neither the kings of Spain nor the Inquisition were ever able to scrub the influences of Al-Andalus from popular culture or even the country's language. An estimated 8% of the Spanish lexicon, over 4,000 words, come from Arabic. And the Moors' zambras, a style of song and dance described as lascivious by the Spanish monarchy, were adopted by Spain's Christian gypsies and performed in secret for generations. The style is now part of the flamenco canon. This is just one story of thousands that have defined human history. It stands as a stark reminder that the playbook of those in control have not changed much, and that marginalization and obliteration are often recycled means of obtaining and preserving structural power. Adversity has and always will exist, and culture, freedom of speech and practice, and the right to the revolutionary act of creating art will always be a target. Overt attacks of the arts and cultural sector include censorship and harassment of artists and audiences. But attacks can arrive insidiously as well. Slashed funding, closing and overtaking of venues, the quiet segregation of stages, and the unchecked commercialization of culture and freedom of speech. Adversity will always exist because imperfect systems of power will always strive to serve their own interest rather than the greater good. However, we, the self-appointed conservators of culture, that utterly undefinable and uniquely human quality and construct, we have the power to decide how we respond to adversity. We have the ability to work as a guiding light in times of darkness. So how we choose to respond matters greatly. Do we lay down and take it and conform to the expectations? Do we leave our posts and say, good riddance, we'll be better somewhere else? Do we stay and fight openly or clandestinely, despite the possibility of great personal loss? How do we belong with intention and continue to create and present amidst adversity? And with that, we're going to go to our questions. Thank you. Thank you so much. Is this one on? Yes, perfect. Okay, so since we started with a historical aspect, let's start with a question that addresses history. Throughout history, the suppression of art has been used to control narratives and communities. What lessons can arts professionals draw from past moments of censorship to inform how we protect creative freedom today? And before I pass that to the panel, we have microphones on either side of the room. We want you guys to be part of the panel as well. We want you to come up, tell us your stories, ask us your questions, make comments. So please do, please share. But again, does anybody want me to repeat that one, or does... Throughout history, the suppression of art has been used to control narratives and communities. What lessons can arts professionals draw from past moments of censorship to inform how we protect creative freedom today?
I'm happy to jump in. I'd like to speak as a presenter and a venue operator, and particularly a historic venue operator, using our buildings and institutions to answer this question. As these buildings travel through time, they are a lens for us to look at our communities and our world and where it is politically, racially, socially, environmentally. And what was happening in the theater generally reflect what is happening in our community at any given time. And so what I'd like to do is, in terms of Thalian Hall, which is construction began in 1855. It was built by freemen and enslaved skilled laborers. And the work that we do at its construction, today, in terms of embracing that history and telling that story out in our communities. And one thing we're looking at right now is researching, because we don't know the names of those enslaved laborers. And that's one thing that we're working with our community, because we want the names of those people at the entrance of the building. This treasured building that when it was built, it was the largest performing arts center in the nation south of Richmond. And definitely an incredible architectural gem. But another example is, you may know of the 1898 coup d'etat that happened in Wilmington. And it's actually the only successful coup led by white supremacists to remove a biracial government that was in Wilmington at that time. And actually the African-American aldermen, leaders of the city, were led out of the theater, which served as a theater and as city hall at the time, at gunpoint down the steps and onto a train, and out of the city, and the white supremacist government was installed. And this led to, this was in 1898, led to a lot of, as a sparking point for segregation, a reemergence of this across the South, leading to Jim Crow. And it was buried for almost 100 years, this story, from our community and from the nation. And over past decades, we have been, our community has been embracing this story, integrating the story into the fabric of the building, and using the building to help tell this story. We recently, through the arts, bringing in cinema, partnered with PBS on a premiere of a film telling the story, Wilmington on Fire, and bringing in descendants from this coup d'etat, and creating community dialogues in the space that it happened in, and leveraging the history, which in terms of, it's our history as a venue. And so we have every right to tell it, and we should tell it, where other community members and maybe other people in our community don't want these stories to be told. Well, it's not their story to tell. And so that is something that, as a venue, we have, and as venues, historic venues, and I say historic venues, because in the United States, historic venue is 50 years and older. So our venues in the 70s tell very important stories from their time, and the 60s and 50s. So I say this because it's a wonderful lens that our venues can use to inform what we do programmatically, because it is our venue story to tell.
So the one thing that really stands out for me as a through line from the Inquisition to the coup d'etat to current day is distorted extremist Christian views that work towards an erasure of cultural practice. And we, I don't remember if it was, I think it was 2 seasons ago, we had a school show of a phenomenal production called Sugar Skull, which is a musical representation of the story of Dia de los Muertos. And we had, as a preface, the Marion Cultural and Civic Center is in Illinois, but we're all the way south in Illinois. We're 30 minutes from Kentucky. We're 6 hours from Chicago. We are a overwhelmingly predominant conservative community. And so our role as a cultural and civic center is to provide representation and context of the rest of the world into that white conservative community, predominantly. And so we had this show scheduled. And because it did not directly align with Christian views, there became a small community, very small community of people, but loud people that wanted the entire performance canceled for the entire community because it didn't represent exactly what their Christian view was. And so the exact same erasure of cultural practice is being attempted still to this day throughout our country. And the key part of this is, you know, despite a lot of social media buzz and a number of people showing up to school board meetings, we are also a city-owned and operated venue. So there's also discussion with the mayor, discussion with the city administrator. But we present it anyway. Despite the diversity, despite there isn't a cancellation there is a moving forward, powering forward, exposing the youth of our community to what the rest of the world represents and is the only way that we can move forward. And in turn, despite the diversity, despite the adversity of it, doing it anyway and moving forward.
Were you able to create any community engagement around that discussion?
No.
And I think kind of the point is, from the people that want to stop this, is that there should be no discussion, full stop, that's it. We discussed earlier that I was told about a similar situation. I'm based in Chicago. I did research on the inclusivity of the cultural scene of Rockford, Illinois. It's a city that's about an hour and a half outside of Chicago. And the LGBTQ community, which is a small community and not super visible in Rockford, has been sort of softly trying to introduce themselves into the broader cultural picture. And one of the events that they set up, and I would like Bea to comment about this afterwards, is that they wanted to set up a drag story hour with the library. The library was okay with that. Day comes that drag story hour has to happen, and a few people show up to protest, and that is absolutely their right. But because those few people turned out to protest and were angry, the library canceled drag story hour. So there are decisions made every day in this country when we have shows, when we have cultural and community gatherings, where if there is just the tiniest bit of pushback, they might decide it's just not worth it. We're just not going to give this community or these people a voice. I thought that was a really, it may seem like a small action, but it was a very damning action. And Bea, I know that you work with Drag Story Hour, so tell us how you've seen those sorts of conversations manifest about safety, about anger, about all around this.
Sure. What I can share is that I got into Drag Story Hour because it was a safe and easy way for me to give back. I wanted to create inclusive family programming, truly inclusive, because when the people of the least in our community feel included, it actually means everybody has a pathway into inclusion. Drag Story Hour quickly became one of the most dangerous things that I did, and I spent 2 years ago, a summer in protest. It was not meant to be in protest. I'm an artist. I came to bring joy. But we had a tour through Northern California, and surprisingly, starting in San Francisco, which was the very first place that we saw a collection of Proud Boys show up with AK-47s on their shirt. So these sort of silent communicators. And what we experienced was just a wild amount of disinformation. We experienced a group of people who were being mobilized to create a shield for misdoings at other stages of government and in other infrastructures. So there is a lot of utilizing the face of one thing to hide the wrongdoings that are happening somewhere else. What I have to remember is that this is actually for families to create a more inclusive experience, but people didn't understand what was happening there. They thought we were doing burlesque for children. The library did not allow the community of drag performers into the library. They only allowed the person who was reading. So a lot of our performers were left outside, and there was a large number of folks from the community protesting us. And I tried to talk. We tried to talk. I was there with the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, and we were trying to have a conversation. But there is such an misinformation that is being shared that really limits the ability to make connections. I was talking with a theater teacher, and I said, I don't understand why you're here. Theater, this is performance. This is about joyful expression. It's also about teaching, inviting people to have, kids to be able to have dissent, to have boundaries, to test their voices. Drag is an opportunity to express boldly, and we need that. And I want to draw this to the fact that freedom, unexpressed freedom is not freedom. Right? Freedom requires pressure to the margins so that we can understand that we are free. So when you start to remove the things that press the margins, these are indicators that the freedom meter is tilting down. So I just like to think about the fact that historically, once you start to see suppression, the flip side is that the art takes to the streets. And so it brings us to sort of street theater, which when we hear cabaret or these things, these are actually forms of, it's when you take street theater out of the streets and place it into a building, it becomes cabaret. But these are expressions that are meant to bring the face of the world reflected to the people right there, where you don't have to go somewhere, you don't have to have admission to some place. And so I just wanted to kind of share that these are the moments where we're going to start to see third spaces happen. And this is a historical thing. When we see oppression tick up, third spaces open up. When we see a more flourishing, abundant world, third spaces start to trim down. I believe that we are in a new place, and I think that the third space is something we should all be thinking about.
Oh, sorry. Just speaking to a positive about this, one thing, I was recently in Salem and was thinking a lot about the witch hunts and what that means, cancellation and fear and truly death. And to an artist, that is part of it. When you are canceled, when there's erasure, that is a form of death. But then, and what's the basis of this? It's fear, totally. But what you said about creating this third space, to uplift something positive is what Justine said about art and culture will survive. So there are third spaces that are being built. Some, bold presenters are doing the right thing and others, but I wanted to call out, I work with a drag artist who's a cosplay drag artist, and we tour anime conventions. So it is, by nature, predominantly, not minority, but predominantly queer, predominantly neurodiverse, and it's niche, and it's specific, and it's a community, often thousands, and usually Gen Z or a little younger, and it's a safe space for them to be expressive as they are truly. So we have a drag race that is actually a competition where the audience can get involved. They come up, they compete for fun games in between professional drag performers, locals do performances. Oftentimes, this is the very first opportunity for these confused, scared queer kids to engage with their community. And because they bought a ticket and it's a private space, and that's what it is, they're safe. But when we went to Orlando, when that law kept on flipping, we weren't sure if we had to put an 18 plus on it when it's meant to be all ages. There's nothing untoward, there's nothing wrong about what's done. And the fact that someone's sexuality is seen as a sexual thing outwardly is so strange, where it's just someone's expression, right?
Something you said just popped off in my head. I'm gonna pass because I see. It'll come back to me.
Please, can you, if you have any questions or comments,
I remember.
there are microphones on either side of the room. Please come and
I remember.
join the conversation, please, please.
I'm curious what some of your considerations are in the face of some of these moments of threats or cancellations or fear of death. When do you determine to push forward and tell the story that needs to be told, host the event that needs to be hosted, to create these spaces for people that need it, versus perhaps reconsidering how to adapt and move forward?
People are going to have different methods of doing it, right? I think for Drag Story Hour, we're now a safety and security organization. That is one of the major things that we do. And we also consult other people on creating safety and security in their spaces. So I now know a lot about background checks. I know a lot about how to do public-private partnerships so that we can have a private space and, sort of allow ourselves the luxury of saying, no, that's not going to work for us here, but also to still be able to invite a public to participate. But we are all going to have to flex in different ways. Other people will, they will spend a lot of time changing their language, right, and creating a smoke or a mirror to move around things. I say drag performer sometimes, but I also say sacred clown. Revealer of mysteries. All of those things are true. But it will be about adaptation and finding the methods that are going to work. I think it will be up to your insight as to which tactic to engage. Right?
A quick thought. I'd love to hear from Nicole on this too, but something that happened with New York Arab Festival, especially last year, because ICE was coming to get people, and there were a lot of issues with the protests going on and policing, and as far as curation, there was some fear around what to present and how dangerous that could be to the artists. Because as a producer, I have to be kind of a mom. Censorship is awful. We don't want to censor anything of what an artist is saying or doing, but you also have to be a protector of the artists, right? When their lives and their being and their status could be in serious endangerment. So there's this fine line, and I think the best thing to do is actually have that conversation rather than say no, but really there was one performer who had an entire anti-Trump performance. And that was their right, but it was also concerning. of what might happen to them, particularly with their immigration status. So these are things that we have to weigh of artistic freedom and expression, but also being careful and protective of our community and of our artists. So I'd be curious, you know, you brought that up with your question, what others have thought about that.
So not directly on that point, but in situations where we have a lot of response from the community in a certain way, we often heighten security. We often have uniformed officers around, but there's a balance to that is also inhibitive. Because as soon as you have a show of authority, the people involved at the event feel, even though it is there for them to be safe, they feel as though there is possibly something for them to be afraid of, and inhibits the freedom and potential expression by having a show of force and authority around. And so it's a delicate balance in measuring what the potential threat level is and how you need to respond to it in a visual manner, as well as for the safety of those involved. And so it's really intrinsically having a good feel for your community and a good feel for the way that and this is as a presenter, for the way that your space operates, and also having open discussions with those performing and operating within your space. And one thing that we also often opt for is having plainclothes security, to where it's not a visible show of force, but we still have the security in place, because it is less inhibitive, but yet still protective. And it really depends on threat level, whether we have a police car somewhere visible outside the building, or whether it's just plainclothes.
We have a person from the audience who's waiting to make a comment. Can we take that one and then continue with the panel? Go ahead.
Thanks. I can't help but think that we have a lot of museums, and that's where a lot of people, can gather. They have interactive type of engagement, storytelling, narratives. But what about flipping that and having the museums come out in the communities and doing what they do in the museums and do it in alternative spaces communities? Can we have conversations about that? And it's not just museums, but other types of entities where we have people that they're gathering, all different cultures, all different ages, families, multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, all of that. Have chat with those curators, and then see how we can then move that engagement in different alternative spaces in our communities, outdoor and indoor, by the way. So just anybody in the room could comment on that too as well and give some suggestions.
Audiences are welcome to comment as well as ask questions.
It's just a thought, because I thought, for instance, the Museum of the Diaspora, and I've forgotten where that's located, but at any rate, I can't help but think that you could approach that museum and then see, in that community, how we could do things around the community, both outdoor and indoor, by the way. Because what we're trying to do is to get people in community, in connection, and conversation, interaction.
That's right.
Okay.
Actually, I would love to respond to that one artist, which I adore. I'm familiar with Weidman Davis dance, and one of their NDP projects not too long ago, actually, Thaddeus and Tanya, the two leaders of the company, developed site-specific work that takes the dance out of the theaters, and it goes into spaces that where blacks were traditionally oppressed, or but also had a hand in operating, building, running these spaces. And they would go in and almost do I guess the work is almost like an exorcism, in a sense, in a very public way, and reclaiming it for those ancestral folks, and then leading to a community picnic outdoors afterwards, where members of the community could actually go into spaces. They would cross the street to walk by some of these spaces and to allow the community to reclaim these spaces that were built by their ancestors. But they are brilliant at developing work to engage and reclaim. I just got to give a shout out to them.
Thank you.
I have a couple of examples. One is, are you New York based?
I am based in Columbia, Maryland, which is in the Washington, D.C. area.
Right. Nice. Being New York based, being Brooklyn based, Brick is actually a great example of a major arts institution that does community engagement, particularly block parties, which is such a Brooklyn thing. So that's taking it to the streets. Of course, they also do these big outdoor concerts that are free, but that's on a larger scale. But when you're talking about block parties, that's taking it to the streets, that's very Brooklyn, Fort Greene style. As far as museums, this is actually something I'm working on personally to try to make those connections between art and museums. They do seem very separate, often, where they don't interact, but with Prehistoric Body Theater, this is a dance company from Indonesia that enacts prehistoric creatures through dance, embodiment. We're working across multidisciplinary with universities, natural history museums, and performing arts centers together. So more of that community aligning rather than separating. And one of the places we're talking to in Chicago, related to the University of Chicago, is the Fossil Lab. So it's run by Paul Sereno, who is this kind of celebrity paleontologist, fossil hunter, kind of like an Indiana Jones type. And it's right in the middle of not Hyde Park, but the neighborhood adjacent to it, which is notably poor, notably African American, and usually so separate from the university. However, 2 new subway lines just came in. And so the Fossil Lab, he's actually planning to build a park that relates to it, where it is specifically for this community, not the university community. So currently the Fossil Lab invites the community in to play with the dinosaur bones. So this is something that is an example of how do you bring it to the community? How do you tell them that they're welcome to come in? And I do think that museums are great opportunity for that, not always just art institutes. So thank you for bringing that up. They have the infrastructure. I'll give you one more thing. Completely. Museums need audiences. So part of my presenters can talk to the fact that everybody wants audiences. They're desperate for audiences. Museums want those dollars, but they're not doing the outreach, right? So you have to make a community feel welcome in order to bring them in. And I don't know if anyone wants to speak to that, though.
We're bumping up against the next question, so I'll bring that in. So how does artistic expression function as a form of safety, visibility, and affirmation for marginalized populations? And what responsibilities do presenters hold in ensuring those conditions exist? Say it again? Yeah. Yes, okay. Sorry, it's a lot, yes. How does artistic expression function as a form of safety, visibility, and affirmation for marginalized populations? And what responsibilities do presenters hold in ensuring those conditions exist?
Okay, that's a loaded and long question. My name is Nicole Brewer. I also reside in the current occupied nation's capital of Washington, D.C. And I'm also a theater director. I forgot to say that earlier. So, okay. There's just a couple of things for me about having these types of conversations with folks that are gathered where we don't know what our shared baseline politic is, right? And I don't mean like, are you a Democrat, are you a liberal, are you conservative? I mean like, what is your baseline analysis around racism inside of the entertainment industry and the systems and cultures of extraction and oppression that dominate that industry and that impact all of us? Every last person in this room has had to sacrifice something for the narrative that you were told was going to get you success. The issue with our industry is that it's presented with this mythology of a ladder. If you do this, if you do this, if you do this, if you do this, eventually you'll get to where you're supposed to be or you want to be or whatever your goal is. But we find with the intersection of our identities, whether for me, that's being African American and descendant of enslaved peoples of this country, to my height, right? To my body size, to my education, to my skin color, as well as a whole bunch of other intersections of identity that actually made it so it was difficult for me to progress, right? It's difficult to have artistic expression inside of an industry that is looking to commodify my human capital at every means, right? In which human needs are not centered, but the dollar is. And so there's that for me that I just kind of wanted to lay out for myself of just like a baseline politic if I am rooted inside of an analysis that is about the humans that are doing the work. And can I investigate the processes in which the people are being asked to do their artistic expression? And when I look at those processes, I can begin to actually say, do I have power in order to diminish the impact of this oppressive system, structure, policy, way of being on that person? Do I have that? If I don't have that, who does have that? And what is their analysis? What is their resilience to wanting to do the work? So I think for myself, a lot of this work is about your individual, like where are you? We have to stop looking for the industry. We have to stop talking about the arts as if everybody is in the arts to do something better for their communities. They are not. And we have to stop thinking that these venues, and I'm not opposed to people making money, but I think a hyper-capitalist state has gotten us to where we are. And we really have to be looking at what does that mean when we hoard wealth inside of the entertainment industry, no matter what industry that might be, opera, musicians, dance, theater, actual building owners inside of the venues, to the artists. So when we ask this question, right, of artistic expression, how does artistic expression function as a form of safety, visibility, and affirmation? I think that question is a bit ahead of the real issue here, which is have you taken the time to understand for yourself what you believe? What do you believe about people being able to do their work with dignity? What do you believe about categorizing racism as a workplace hazard that is the institution's job to mitigate? What do you believe, right, about slowing your processes down so you can communicate with people? Part of the problem in our industry is we're working so damn fast that we never really have time to connect with one another. And the conference is a great, this is a great example. You come to a place, there's all these people, we got these big, huge badges hanging around our neck. You check in, is this somebody who I wanna, do I wanna give my time to these people? And I understand that in terms of our capacity and our spirit. But I just wanted to say that, you all, that when I look at this, what responsibilities do presenters hold in ensuring those conditions? The presenters have the least, they probably have the least amount of power. So we really want to look at what is the community, what's the web of understanding, what are you able to do, how are you being transparent about what you can't do, and then how are we then rethinking what we can do to make sure, and I want to just come back to this safety bit because this part is huge, right? There are no do-overs when people take your life. And so we really have to begin to go, what does it mean to operate, not from a place of fierceness? Listen, I'm blackity black, as Nisiaya would say. This is an incredible artist who is located here in NYC. But what I'll say about that is resilience is inside of my cultural legacy and my understanding. And so the terrorism that has been happening since my people were taken and brought to this country and made to build it to what it is just a part of my everyday. So I'm not sure that somatically I'm any more enflared at the shenanigans that are happening right now. But I will say this sense of like safety in terms of your ability to come back from a thing is really at question. And so people need to be considering, what does it mean to bring folks in? What is our analysis? What can we do? What can't we do?
Can I ask a question? I just want to echo off of what you said. It is true, as a community, we're not all on the same page. And I think we're giving ourselves a discount if we have this entire conversation, us, the woke arts community, and the hostile outside, and how do we create spaces for us to be oh so woke. I'm an immigrant. Everything I say on stage can make me be kicked out of here tomorrow. I couldn't control where I was born, and I'm Israeli. And every time I go on stage, someone in the audience has a very firm opinion on what I have to say. And everybody is angry, and everyone is mad. But the most backlash that I've been getting is from my fellow artists who don't want to be seen on the same stage with me because it's gonna impact their future career. Because God forbid they will be associated with me because of where I was born, or because what I do on stage is critical and badass, and they feel scared that I put them at risk. And I was told that by creating art at this time, I'm putting everyone at risk, and I need to think twice if I'm being responsible towards my community to say and speak my piece on stage. So I just want to challenge you to answer the questions from both angles. Us as, maybe an us versus them, and what we can do as, an artistic community in front of a community, and what is it that we can do inside of us as an artistic community to make sure that in these times, all opinions and all artistic expressions are welcome, even if they're risky at this time, even if they're a little bit of outside of what everyone's willing to hear and say right now. Thank you.
I'd like to touch on again, visibility and affirmation, and the, as presenters and venues, embracing resistance and protest. And given our history as a municipal center and as a venue, our main steps for the venue is a central place for community protest and rallies. It was the epicenter for our Black Lives Matter events in the city, and No Kings protests, and healthcare, and go on and on and on. And it is something that we as a venue could, reject or embrace. And it is something that we, definitely embrace, because it, again, giving that visibility and affirmation as a venue on what happens outside, outward looking from the community, looking at the venue, it affirms what we, want to do on our stages. And so before you approach the venue, you see this embrace, this structure as a place where our community can gather and rally and protest peacefully and loudly, and something that I do encourage other venues to embrace as well, because it does make a very powerful statement to the many marginalized communities in our region.
I want to thank Nicole, especially, and also the questioner, and the conversation we're having is so rich and thought-provoking. I want to present a slightly different perspective from an artist residency organization. From the beginning of my time at Saltonstall, we began to think, we backed up a little bit and thought about access, sort of with a capital A, and who we were not serving, who was missing at the table to begin with, and what were the barriers to entry. We are a competitive juried residency, which means that artists and writers apply to come to Saltonstall for free stipend-supported residencies, time and space for visual artists to work and for writers. We also had a playwriting category last year for you playwriters in the audience. There are so many communities that at the very beginning are simply denied access. So some of the things we began to change, we eliminated the application fee. So we eliminated this economic barrier to entry. We began work on a fully accessible universal design edition, so we can finally accept artists and writers with disabilities. So we completed that renovation in 2021. As it turns out, the pandemic was a great time to build a building. Who knew? We also realized that, at least in our arts world, parents with children were really not being included. It was a really difficult thing to ask parents to take a month out of their lives to step away to come to this beautiful, bucolic residency in Ithaca. So we established very short one-week residencies for solo parents. So kids are left home and partners are left home, and we provided enough of a stipend to support childcare for them. Also, those with less resources and less education were probably being denied access because at the time that I came to Saltonstall, jurying also included people's resumes. So we established an anonymous jurying program where juries were only able to see an applicant's name and their work sample. Excuse me, they were not able to see an applicant's name. They were only able to see a statement and work samples. And all of a sudden, we really saw that sort of bell curve begin to sort of widen out a little bit. There were older artists that were beginning to be accepted, younger artists, artists who had not been to college, who didn't have MFAs. It just expanded the variety of artists and writers that we began to accept. And I was very proud of that because it didn't matter where you went to school, where you had been published, whether you had advanced degrees or not. It was the quality of your work. And if you wanted to be there and you were doing good work, we wanted to support you. So I wanted to bring some of those topics to the table also, just broadly speaking about access to resources and access to support that I don't know, hopefully that will contribute a little bit to sort of the broader performing arts conversation we're having.
So one of the things I referenced that we're in a very conservative community. And as a city-owned and operated venue, we operate at an overall, as far as our building itself, at a loss that is then filled in and funded by the city, intentionally. Because back in the 70s, the mayor at that time created the charter that established the Marion Cultural and Civic Center with the language that we would create a cultural atmosphere within the community, and in turn it would be the rental rates for our venue for local production and local access would be incredibly low. We are an 1,100 seat building, and it costs $600 per performance for community theater to work within our space. We have 90 moving lights, we have state-of-the-art sound, we have everything as a professional theater, and these community groups can come in and take advantage of that at no extra cost, including our professional designers and operators in-house that will work that for those community groups. With that, 14 years ago, one community group came to me and said, we want to try and do a production of Rocky Horror Show. Full stage production, full theater piece. And I said, yeah, let's do it, we're in. And we announced it, we put it on sale. We had about over 4 performances. We had about 1,000 tickets sold already. And the mayor at the time, I believe he was 80 something at the time. He had been in office, whenever he left office, or actually died in office, he had been in office for 56 years. And he came and asked, he's like, oh, what is this Rocky Horror thing that's new that you're putting on? And I said, well, it's transvestite aliens coming to take over the world through sexual revolution. And he said, well, you have to cancel that right now. And I said, I'm sorry, we're under contract. And we already have a response from the community. And he said, well, he said, you're really going to need to cancel it. I said, I don't think we can, which was a lie. I mean, I'm at his directive. But This was at another performance, and I said, well, why don't we come back and talk about it next week? So I decided in that week time to really push hard into marketing. To prove that there was community support for something that is that inclusive in that community. We are now on our 14th consecutive year of that production. Averaging about 2,500 tickets sold per weekend that we do it. It's just a one-weekend show, and it's all local production, and it is a safe space of radical inclusivity. I have a discussion with the audience saying that and talking about that every time. Depending on the political climate, touching back on security, this is where I learned that balance of uniformed officers versus undercover officers or plainclothes officers. Yeah. Because the self-expression of the audience itself changed whenever I had uniformed officers there. But to the great pleasure for myself is that the commercial success and the profit was actually what proved that things were viable for that community to administration on a different side. The dollars of it are what changed the conversation.
Yeah. There's something I just want to piggyback on in what Josh is saying, which is the examples that you're offering is you utilizing your power to disrupt oppressive ways of being, right? And that's also specific to the body that you hold and the identities that you hold. But I'm glad that you were able to do it and that people can hear these examples of possibility. I also think in terms of these Israeli artists who spoke about the backlash that you're experiencing, that there is something for me that I think is deeply, deeply missing, which is the skills to have uncomfortable conversations. And that those conversations need to be had before we thrust people into situations and just go, it's art, accept it, right? And so I don't know whose job that is, so to speak, or whose role or whose lane that is to have those conversations, but to put you in a situation in which you don't feel seen, you can't be heard, and you're being told that you are the problem is exactly indicative of the industry in the United States. Right? That the people with the least amount of power are problematized and told that you're the issue and that you, as the issue, need to fix yourself or remove yourself, right? And so what I would offer this entire audience is like, also, how are you encouraging conversations for items that you know might be sticky in your communication? How are you partnering with community leaders to hold those conversations way ahead of time so that the ramp is longer? It's not just about your planning and your season and your wish to want to be everywhere. It is how are we there in a way that is actually connecting the tissues to the community so that change can happen, right? So just wanted to say that I saw you, I heard you, I deeply appreciate your vulnerability and sharing your experience. And that I also appreciate the success story that Josh is sharing and others I'm sure have many could share, but it's also an example of how amending your values is a survivable event. So again, are you looking at what values you're upholding, you're afraid to challenge, and are you using all the power that you have to actually disrupt and make space, right? We're not trying to end racism, it's not gonna happen. Ending oppression is not gonna happen in any of our lifetimes, but that doesn't mean that we are absolved from doing what we need to do in order to diminish its impact on our bodies and our breath.
I agree that the time that we're living in right now is really showing a lot of the cracks in our own industry. I think the arts have always thought of themselves as so progressive and so open, and we're starting to see, and I personally, through my entire career, have seen as well that one of the things that we lack the most is respect for our colleagues. I think I've lived several situations where I felt deeply disrespected for the artists that I work with, for the kind of work that I bring to this country. And I think at the most minimum and the most basic, we should be able to respect our colleagues enough to sit on a stage with them, whether we agree with them or not. And that's why this is super important. And that's why it's super important that you guys are here. So thank you again for that. Because when we start sowing those seeds of basic respect, we can start having those kinds of conversations. Because you can't have a conversation that could quickly become contentious if you don't have a basic respect for the person who you're having it with. And so, you know, I think that a lot of those conversations or doing, you know, putting on a show that can be seen as subversive is risky. But as Josh just showed us, with great risk, can come a lot of, you know, a great response, can come great growth, can come amazing payback. And so, yes, I just wanted to throw that out there before inviting our next audience member to speak.
And I just find myself nervous as hell to speak because I have so much more that I want to say than I can possibly say. But I want to thank each and every one of you for this. I absolutely love all the contributions. Josh, this success story, it makes me think of, I promise that I'm driving towards a question at the end. I really do. Nicole, I hear you talking about structures and positionality and a word that gives me a little bit the heebie-jeebies to say because it's so overdetermined, which is privilege. But we all have to examine what privilege we carry when we walk in the room. I carry an immense amount. I carry some vulnerabilities as well when I walk in the room, but I carry immense privilege. So it's looking at those, and I'm thinking about the responsibility of the artist to develop oblique strategies to create work that somehow is able to subvert the systems that are in place. David Wondrich in his book Stump and Survive, I teach about American music. And so I think, Nicole, again, going to structures, I teach about the Blackface Minstrel Show, which is at the core of the whole construction of popular culture in the America, or at least in the Northern Hemisphere. And then Western culture as it's expanding. God, shout out Valley. So I think about that structure, and at the same time, the structure of the Hush Harbor Church, and these things are going on at the same time. So the Hush Harbor Church is really one of the very first safe spaces in this country. Justine, your framing of this whole thing was so fantastic. I love that you took us so far back. So I think the question that I want to drive at is, again, Nicole, I keep coming back to, I also want to mention the third spaces that you're driving at, because this is exactly the kinds of things we need to create. But you talked about your cultural legacy. And I think of the Hush Harbor Church, and I think that's for those who don't know, it's the secret black church that was growing up in safe spaces. Really, I think of it as the first safe space here in the United States. But you claimed that as your cultural legacy. But I think because I'm a jazz musician and I'm a musician and a composer, and I can't help but work with black cultural materials. And so I think a lot about this is also my legacy, but then how do I come at this work? And so can I ask a question? I don't even have it really framed very well, but how can we think about our shared cultural legacy? Is that fair?
It's fair because that's what's on your heart. I don't know. I think these big juicy questions are really interesting. And where do we find our connective tissue inside of how do we learn and respect each other, right? So for myself, well over a decade ago now, it really became, how am I learning about indigenous peoples of Turtle Island? How am I going back and making space for their actual stories as told by them to be the thing that I am referencing and not my elementary, middle school, high school teaching or learning of indigenous erasure. And so I think just as I have to humble myself in service to learning about and respecting other people's values, especially since I live here, right? And my life is supported by the waterways and the land of indigenous peoples, I feel like I can find you inside of this question that you're asking. And I do think that this word about respect, and because respect is different culturally, again, there is always that communication and conversation of what does it look to respectfully hold somebody else's story, right? And that begins with an asking and receiving of permission. Do I have this permission to share this, to hold this, to grow this inside of my art, right? And so who grants that permission? I don't know, right? But I have found that no's are not given to people who are sincere inside their appreciation for others and how they are sharing their stories. Thank you.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We have another audience member who'd like to speak.
Hi. First, I just have to boast. A little over 50 years ago, I got to see the Rocky Horror Show live twice in Los Angeles with Tim Curry.
Yay!
I want to talk about 2 points. One is, and I think this room is filled more with producers of work rather than the presenters of work, and I would encourage producers to be very open and to remember that we need to live in a world of no surprises, that it's important to be very blunt about telling about what is going to be presented so that the presenters can do what they have to prepare their environment. I know of presenters who have made a choice to go against the instructions from above and have lost their jobs. And I know of others who've had to make certain kinds of relationships with other factors within their environment, because many presenters are nested within bigger institutions. I had my job threatened when I was running Grand Performances, which is a free concert performing arts program in downtown Los Angeles, because some artists were stepping on the American flag, and I was under a corporate environment at that time. They were so upset, the ownership of the buildings was so upset about the American flag, they didn't comment to me at all about the 6-foot dildos that the artists were wearing. The other point I wanted to just talk about was about security. At Grand Performances, we got the opportunity to show a film called Made in America, which dealt with the development of the Crips and the Bloods. And we were going to be the very first opportunity anywhere where there would be a large audience. Some of the members of those two gangs who had been in the film got to see it at the Directors Guild or at a couple of other small places. But we were going to be the first place where those people who were in the film or who were associated with other people from the film were going to be able to gather. And so we were going to probably have in our audience Crips and Bloods or people closely related to both of them. I did not want the LAPD there. So I contacted the mayor's czar for gang activity, and he recommended 2 former gang members who were known figures, and we engaged them to be very prominent on the plaza and to send messages that, 1, we wanted this to be a safe experience, and 2, I wanted to make sure that everybody who came knew that we wanted them to come back and see everything else that we were doing. And I say this to encourage us all to think about how do we look at alternatives to police forces to create safe environments when we create situations where there could be tough situations.
Thank you. So one of the things that I've been working with other artists in the Bay Area, you know, I come here, you said, but there's no ladder. I don't think there's a ladder here for my work. There are people and contacts and relationships here for my work. I'm like canceled by Duke. So I'm experiencing, it's happening to everybody. It's happening to everybody. And I laugh about it because why expend these tears on these things, right? This is something to be solved or thought of or to be figured out. And I'm here for the problem solving. So one of the things that we're kind of grappling with in the Bay Area, queer artists of color, is that, we want to be seen, but we also want to be safe. We want to find audience and appreciation for our work, but we don't want to do it at the risk of bodily harm or, when they dox you, things like that. So we've started trying to understand, okay, are we waiting for other people to create third spaces? But we started investigating the 501c7. And the 501c7, for those who don't know, it's a tax-exempt organization that serves a membership. And so the membership pays dues, and as long as that money goes back into serving the members, you can have your tax exempt, you can have a bar in your space, and you can have a guest list, but it is not open to the public. So we're looking for different ways to kind of partner to be able to create spaces where we can have the resources. And so a 501c7 in a membership strategy means that potentially you can amass a number of artists enough to maybe buy a building, maybe to buy a facility, so that we have the ability to keep ourselves safe in a way that the 501c3 does not offer that to us. So as these are the things we're trying to find these other pathways, and I think that partnership, I'm looking for partners. I'm looking for people to brainstorm with, to think through, because I don't think the answer for me as an artist is necessarily in this industry as it has manifested. But I believe the people to solve for the problems we're having today are in the room. Yeah. So I'm saying that, so come talk to me, if you want, I'm just really interested in what's next, because that's, to me, fixing the old. We're in a whole unprecedented time. So I'm really interested in what is next and how we can subvert with institutions, with 501c7s. What are for those who don't know, it's like if you have someone who has a club, a private club, what is it, the Shrine, or the Elks Club, and that's the private club kind of model that is being used. And I just want to subvert these models. I'm like, oh, this is how you get to pay for your drinks and have your cigar rooms and keep folks out. That's okay. We can totally subvert that model to create spaces that invite the communities that we want to experience together in. So just a thought. And residencies. I think residencies are these amazing spaces because they fly a bit under the radar and they collect artists. So the kind of thought expression that can happen there, I'm thinking about my Israeli artist in arms, is that we have to have these spaces to have dialogues as well. And so residencies actually have a power now, maybe more than ever, to be a part of fomenting the conversation and the spaces for strategy and action.
I love you for that. Thank you. I appreciate that. Just to add a tiny comment, in the world I live in, and maybe the world you live in as well, artists and writers have always been excluded, right? It's like they've always had to find community together because they've never really truly been supported in our culture or society. And certainly that's happening now in ways that it was in the early 90s during the culture wars, and it was in the 50s in McCarthyism. I mean, it's just, I feel like we just keep repeating ourselves over and over again. So yes, I really appreciate that. And I have learned so much since I've been at Saltonstall about community building and solidarity and support and artists and writers by necessity depending on one another and forming community with each other and forming new kinds of organizations that haven't existed before. And I think it's honestly, it's been humbling and incredibly educational for me to watch this happening over time. Like I've been there long enough to see this happening. And I think it's up to arts organizations to listen, just to listen more closely to artists because they're really telling us what they need and also sort of showing us the way. I mean, not to be too like inspirational, but I do feel inspired by the artists and writers that I see every day and work with every day. But that sense of community building, I think, has always been there. They've had to, and they continue to.
I'd like to, again, just encourage to charge our venues to tell the stories of your venues, the good, the bad, the ugly. And there's so much habit to tell the pretty stories in our venues. It's very important to embrace our full story. We have, again, our venues tell the stories of our communities. And I'll talk about one thing in particular, so much wealth of data on segregation in our box office records, in our advertisements, that historically they tell who was seated where, when, how much, for what performances. And actually a colleague here, Randy McKay from Carolina Theater in Durham, and I love the embrace of their history. They actually have their Jim Crow era box office in the venue where it can be visited, celebrated in terms of not I guess celebrated, but I mean in terms of recognized. It's not hidden away, where so many theaters have demolished them and hidden them away and drywalled over these areas. And the community needs to see it. Youth need to see it. And I'd love to talk about, there's a lawsuit that happened at the theater in 1870. A group of black men went and bought tickets and they sat in the white-only section and they were ejected from the theater. And they sued the theater. And in the ruling, actually, the judge disgustingly chastised them, saying they were inciting violence. But they were actually awarded in favor. They said that they actually won the lawsuit against the theater and saying that their civil rights were impeded upon. And this is a very interesting ruling at that time. And then you have, a few years later, Frederick Douglass spoke at the theater to an audience with the black and white attendees seated on the same floor years after that. And then you see, again, things turning in a very dark direction in the 1890s for the community. You see this pendulum moving back and forth. And this was, almost 100 years prior to the Greensboro Four. And actually, one of the Greensboro Four, Joseph McNeil, grew up in Wilmington, grew up in Thalian Hall. And, that's one thing I want to connect the dotted lines to see, did he know about these lawsuits? Did he know these men when he was younger? Who caused that lawsuit in 1870, and what and then is there any connection there? But I think it's very important for us because there's so much data and information about our communities and what was done wrong in those times, and that's something that we share. We have every fourth grader through in the region with their North Carolina history. We tell them these stories. They need to know these stories. And so please, again, I just charge our historic theaters and all our venues to tell your full stories.
So we are technically out of time, but we have one more member of the audience who is standing at a microphone. So please say your piece.
Thanks. I normally don't talk in front of microphones, so my heart's beating a million miles an hour. My name's Azadi Iman. I'm a composer, pianist, and storyteller. In my current project that I'm developing, I'm interviewing queer and trans elders about their life stories, recording our conversations, and then using those stories, creating compositions that mirror folk stories and want to present these stories for white audiences. And I'm wondering, I guess my question is, how with like Rocky Horror Picture Show and how open you were about what it was about, where is that balance of being very clear about what the work that I'm doing versus somehow subverting it? And is that audience-based? Is it, how do I figure out how to talk about this body of work?
So for me personally, and in the situation and the community that we're in, my preference is to do the work without saying what the work is. Primarily because we're creating representation, we're creating a visual representation of diversity on stage, and all of these words are triggering to social media right now. And there's a way to do the work while not causing yourself excess trouble by saying these individual triggering words that an opposing community will jump upon and then press against you. And so in that interaction with the mayor about Rocky Horror, I was directly reporting to him and the city chief of staff. The city chief of staff at the time was his daughter's lesbian partner. And so I knew that there was a little bit of, mental insight that I had an avenue to start a conversation despite his incredibly conservative outward appearance and past. And so I was able to measure that situation, to be so blunt and to have that conversation. But knowing the audience that you're talking to and what the potential triggers are that could actually shut down your programming, and avoiding those while still doing the work, is something that's been really important for me in that conservative community.
I would just say also, as a producer that works extensively in queer spaces, and this is one of my shows, Rowdies in Love, is radical queer Bharatanatyam with 8 male dancers. That used to be grant speak. The more times you said queer, the more likely you were to get a grant. Now, you can't say it at all. You say DEI, you say diverse. You say variety instead of diverse. We have a variety of people, not diversity of people, because that word's ugly. Did you notice the DEI wasn't in the title of this particular panel? Guess what? It was at WA, but not here. There's a whiplash. There's a whiplash that's happening. Do your work. Be honest about it. I think the gentleman that used to work for Grand Performances was right. Don't lie to the presenters, but be clever with marketing. Use your words, because what is it really about? Is this a human story? Is it a multi-generational story?
Yep.
Is it a story about families? Lead with that, because that's relatable to anybody. And then they walk in and know what happens to be a bunch of trans people. Cool, it's a bunch of people. So think about, instead of these trigger words that used to be the grant gold and now are the cancellation, think about the things that are universal and connect us, and lead with that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Just to close, it's so disheartening to me as a professional in this space to have to hear that kind of question. How do I say just enough about my piece so that it's interesting, but not enough to scare people away? Because you want your work to see the light of day, to see the light of a stage. And I think that the least we can do as professionals is open ourselves up enough to have these honest conversations where we can talk to each other in full description about what we're doing, what the intent is behind it. Because I really feel that if we don't do that amongst ourselves, all the folks that are running our government right now are winning. They're winning. And this is a moment where we need to draw a line in the sand, and we need to say, no, we are better than this. And I really encourage you to walk away from this conversation, to continue having conversations with everyone here, but to walk away from this conversation saying, what am I willing to risk? Why am I willing to risk it? And how do I, from this moment on, take a stand and say, we will not repeat history again. We will be the guiding light in the darkness, because somebody's got to do it, and Lord knows it's not going to be the politicians. So thank you so much for coming. I hope that you have been inspired. I hope that you've taken wonderful ideas away from this. I hope that you will be honest with yourselves and with your colleagues. And thank you for sitting on this panel and speaking so openly about your practice.
I just want to offer that the institutions are made up of people, that the people who are having to enact these choices are not the institutions. You are not your institutions, and there are other pathways to take your values and all the things that you care about and find new pathways forward. So I just wanted to say I don't want to vilify the people inside of the institutions, because the people are what's going to solve and move us forward.
Thank you.